At my brother's wedding, I was seated behind a pillar, so I left. What happened later made them regret everything. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, bordered with gold leaf that shimmered under my apartment's dim lighting. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson cordially invite you to celebrate the marriage of their daughter Elizabeth Ann to Daniel James Harlow. My brother's name, embossed in perfect calligraphy, seemed to mock me from the glossy surface. I traced his name with my fingertip, remembering when we were children building forts from couch cushions and promising to be each other's best friends forever. But people grow up, they change, they forget. 3 months later, I stood before my mirror, examining my reflection in the emerald green dress I'd spent 2 weeks' worth of my gallery assistant salary to purchase. My dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, my makeup subtle but flattering. I wanted to look my best, to show them all that Olivia Harlow wasn't the perpetual disappointment they thought she was. "You look beautiful," I told my reflection, practicing the smile I'd wear all evening. Who cares what they think? I did. That was the problem. My parents had never understood my passion for art. "It's not practical," my father would say, his voice tinged with disappointment. "You need something stable, Olivia. Look at your brother, top of his class, scholarship to business school, making 6 figures before 30. Daniel, the golden child. Everything he touched turned to success. Everything I touched, well, let's just say I was still paying off student loans for a fine arts degree while working in a gallery that barely covered my rent." In my parents' eyes, I was the cautionary tale they told their friends' children in hushed tones. Don't end up like Olivia. Such potential, wasted on frivolous dreams. The drive to the venue tightened the knot of anxiety in my stomach. The historic Palmer Estate was breathtaking. A renovated 19th century mansion with sprawling gardens and a newly constructed glass atrium where the ceremony would take place. As I navigated the winding driveway, I couldn't help but admire the seamless blend of classic architecture and modern design. I'd always had an eye for beauty, after all. It was the only thing I trusted about myself. "Name?" asked a bored-looking usher at the entrance, tablet in hand. "Olivia Harlow, the groom's sister." His eyes scanned the list, face unchanging. "Right, follow me, please." I trailed behind him through the atrium entrance, where white roses and silver ribbons adorned every surface. The glass ceiling soared above us, letting in the late afternoon sunlight that cast a golden glow over the assembled guests. I recognized faces from childhood, distant relatives, family friends, my parents' business associates. They chatted excitedly, champagne flutes in hand, not noticing me as I passed. The usher led me deeper into the room, past row after row of white chairs draped with silk ribbons. I expected him to stop near the front, where family would naturally be seated. Instead, he continued toward the back, finally gesturing to a chair in the last row. "Here you are, Ms. Harlow." I stared at the chair, then at the massive stone pillar directly in front of it. The architectural column, while beautifully preserved from the original structure, completely blocked my view of the altar. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice smaller than intended. "I'm the groom's sister." The usher checked his tablet again and shrugged. "This is the assigned seating from the bride's coordinator. I'm sorry, but we're about to begin." He walked away before I could protest further. Slowly, I sank into the chair, my expensive dress folding awkwardly around me. From my position, I could see nothing of the altar where my brother would soon stand. If I leaned far to the right, I could catch a glimpse of the guests' profiles, but remained essentially invisible to anyone at the front. I pulled out the program from my clutch. There, in small print, Olivia Harlow, sister of the groom. At least I'd made it onto the paper. Small victories. As more guests filed in, I observed who received the priority seating. My parents' neighbors who'd moved away 5 years ago. Elizabeth's third cousin who flew in from Switzerland. Her sorority sisters, giggling and taking selfies. And then I couldn't believe my eyes. A small white dog in a tuxedo collar being carried to a special seat near the front by Elizabeth's mother. The bride's Maltese had better seating than I did. I scanned the room for my parents, finally spotting them in the front row. My mother, resplendent in blue silk, fussed with my father's tie. They looked proud, happy. They hadn't even asked if I'd arrived. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "You here yet? Wedding starting soon. I typed back, I'm here, behind a pillar in the back row. Can't see anything. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. The string quartet began playing. Guests hushed and turned expectantly toward the entrance. From my seat, I could see nothing but the backs of heads and that damned pillar. Something inside me cracked. Then, a thin fissure that had been forming for years, finally splitting wide open. I'd spent my entire life trying to matter to these people. I'd attended every one of Daniel's graduations, cheering the loudest. I'd sent thoughtful birthday gifts to parents who forgot mine half the time. I'd swallowed criticisms and backhanded compliments about my little art hobby, and when are you getting a real job at every family gathering. And this was what I got in return? A seat behind a pillar while a dog got the VIP treatment? The music swelled. The procession had begun. And I made a decision. Quietly, I gathered my small clutch purse. I smoothed my expensive dress, and with the dignity I'd always tried to maintain, despite being the family disappointment, I stood up. Not a single head turned as I slipped out of my row. Not one person noticed as I walked up the side aisle, past all the beautifully dressed guests focused on the bride's entrance. No one saw me push open the heavy wooden door and step out into the corridor. Outside the atrium, I paused, waiting for someone, anyone to come after me. My brother, my mother, even a concerned usher. Nobody came. I walked through the elegant hallway, my heels clicking against marble floors, past framed historical photographs of the Palmer Estate in its original glory, past the renovated East Wing with its modern amenities. I knew more about this building than they realized. Much more. As I reached the grand entrance, my phone buzzed again. Daniel, where are you? Mom's asking. I turned off my phone and slipped it back into my clutch. Then I nodded politely to the valet and walked toward the administrative offices in the West Wing. The security guard recognized me immediately, though no one in my family would have understood why. Miss Harlow, he said with a deferential nod. Didn't expect to see you today. Hello, Thomas, I replied, a new resolve steadying my voice. I need to speak with Marlene immediately. It's about Plan B. His eyebrows shot up, but he didn't question me. He simply reached for his radio and called the venue director. Inside, something had shifted. The hurt was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it grew something else, a cold, clear purpose. For years they'd overlooked me, dismissed me, relegated me to the background of their lives. They were about to learn how expensive that mistake had been. As I waited for Marlene to arrive, I gazed out the window at the sprawling grounds of the estate. My estate, in more ways than they knew. I wasn't just attending my brother's wedding today. I was about to crash it. Marlene arrived within minutes, her usual composed demeanor shifting to concern when she saw me. Olivia, shouldn't you be at the ceremony? I was, I said, smoothing my dress, until I discovered my assigned seat was behind a pillar. Her eyes widened. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate doesn't begin to cover it. I gestured toward her office. Can we talk, Rivalent? Once behind closed doors, I sank into the leather chair across from her desk. This room had been where it all began 3 years ago, where a simple gallery exhibition had changed the trajectory of my life. The Palmer Estate had been falling into disrepair when I first visited. I'd come to photograph the crumbling architecture for an exhibition on forgotten historical sites. Instead, I'd found myself captivated by its potential. While others saw decay, I saw possibility, the perfect blend of history and future. Do you remember what you said to me that day? I asked Marlene, who had been the estate's historical preservation consultant back then. She smiled faintly. I said it was a shame such beauty would be lost to corporate development. That day, I'd learned the estate was slated to become office space. The Historical Preservation Board was fighting it, but without funds to purchase and restore the property, they were losing the battle. I had little money then, just enough to cover my modest lifestyle and occasional art supplies. But what I did have was a small inheritance from my grandmother. She'd been the only one who believed in me, who saw value in my artistic eye. You see beauty others miss, she'd told me before she died. Don't let anyone dim that light. The inheritance was meant for emergencies, according to my parents. They'd expected me to need it when my art phase inevitably failed. Instead, I'd invested all of it, $105,000, into the Palmer Estate Preservation Fund. They still don't know, do they? Marlene asked, interrupting my thoughts. No, I admitted. What would be the point? My brother launches startups. My father manages hedge funds. My mother sits on charity boards. What's $785,000 to them? A rounding error. What I didn't say was how that initial investment had grown. When the Preservation Committee formed a private company to purchase and renovate the estate, my contribution had secured me a significant stake. When other investors grew impatient with the slow restoration process and sold their shares, I'd quietly bought them out, using profits from my frivolous art sales my family never bothered to ask about. Now, I owned 51% of the most exclusive wedding venue in the region, the very venue my brother had spent a fortune to book for his perfect day. Your investment saved this place, Marlene said. Your vision turned it into what it is today. That was the irony my family would never appreciate. My artistic eye had seen the potential in this decaying mansion. My connections in the art world had brought in the designers who blended historical authenticity with modern luxury. My marketing suggestions had positioned the Palmer Estate as the premier venue for those who appreciated architectural history. All those useless skills my family had dismissed had created the perfect backdrop for Daniel's wedding. And not one of them had thought to ask how he'd secured a booking at a venue with a 3-year waiting list. I'd pulled strings. I'd made it happen. Because despite everything, he was still my brother, and I'd wanted him to have his perfect day. You know, I said, reaching for my phone, when Daniel told me they were getting married here, I was touched. I thought perhaps they'd chosen it because of me, a small acknowledgement of my passion for historical architecture. Naive? I know. I pulled up the seating chart Marlene had sent me weeks ago for approval, a courtesy extended to the majority shareholder. I delegated the review, not wanting to interfere with Elizabeth's vision. Show me where they put me, I requested. Marlene pulled up the final seating arrangement on her tablet. There it was, my name, scribbled in as an afterthought in the furthest corner, behind a structural pillar that couldn't be removed during renovation due to historical preservation requirements. Did they request this specifically? I asked, my voice steady. Marlene hesitated. The bride's mother made most of the seating arrangements. When our coordinator mentioned that the pillar would block views, she said. Marlene stopped abruptly. What did she say, Marlene? She sighed. She said it wasn't an issue because Olivia won't care. She's just the artsy sister who won't know anyone anyway. The words settled like stones in my stomach. Not even my own mother had objected. I see. I stood up. Decision made. Initiate Plan B. Right now. Marlene's eyes widened. Plan B was our emergency protocol, designed for true catastrophes like structural failures or security threats. Olivia, are you certain? I'm certain, I interrupted, my voice ice cold. They put me behind a pillar at my own venue. I think a little technical difficulty is in order. She nodded once, then reached for her radio. This is Director Hayes. Initiate Protocol B, Authorization Harlow Primary. Effective immediately. I walked to the window overlooking the atrium. Through the glass, I could see the ceremony in full swing. Daniel and Elizabeth standing before the officiant, my parents beaming in the front row, guests dabbing at sentimental tears. None of them had noticed my absence. None of them would expect what came next. I smiled as Marlene hung up the radio. How long until the systems respond? 3 minutes, she replied. Are you sure you want to watch? Oh yes, I said, feeling a calm I hadn't experienced in years. I wouldn't miss this for the world. From the second-floor observation balcony, I had a perfect view of the ceremony below. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could see everything now when minutes ago I'd been blinded by a pillar. Marlene stood beside me, her tablet displaying a countdown. 30 seconds, she whispered. I nodded, my heart racing with a strange mixture of anticipation and regret. Part of me wanted to stop this, to be the bigger person. But then I remembered Elizabeth's mother's words. She's just the artsy sister who won't know anyone anyway. Years of dismissal crystallized into resolve. 10 seconds, Marlene said. Below, the officiant was mid-sentence. For as long as you both shall. Then it began. The first thing to go was the sound system. The officiant's microphone cut out mid-word, his mouth still moving but no sound amplifying through the speakers. Confusion rippled through the front rows. Someone tapped the microphone. Nothing. I watched Daniel's face, first annoyed, then embarrassed, as the technical glitch interrupted his perfect moment. The lights flickered next, not all at once, but in waves across the atrium. The elegant chandeliers, the subtle floor lighting, the decorative sconces along the walls, all pulsing in an uncoordinated rhythm before dimming to half power. The natural light from the glass ceiling still illuminated the space, but the romantic ambiance was gone. Guests began to murmur, heads turning, seeking explanation. The wedding planner rushed forward, her headset pressed to her ear, panic evident in her movements. "Main systems disengaging," Marlene narrated quietly, reading from her tablet. "Backup generators are intentionally not responding." But the real spectacle was yet to come. The retractable glass ceiling, the pride of our renovation, had been designed to open partially on perfect weather days, letting in fresh air while maintaining climate control. It was a marvel of engineering, consisting of interlocking panels that could slide into specific configurations. Now, those panels began to move, not in their usual choreographed pattern, but in reverse. Instead of opening gracefully from the center outward, they retracted from the edges first, creating an ever-widening ring that exposed the wedding party to the open sky. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as the first drops of rain, a light spring drizzle that hadn't been in the forecast, spattered onto the white silk runners. "Weather radar shows it's just a passing shower," Marlene said, almost apologetically. "Nothing that would have canceled the event." "Perfect," I whispered. The bride's pristine updo began to wilt in the moisture. Her mother leapt up, trying to shield her with a program. My brother's face had transformed from confusion to alarm, scanning the crowd, looking for someone to blame or perhaps, finally, for me. The venue staff moved with practiced efficiency, despite the chaos. They'd been briefed on emergency protocols, though they believed this was a systems malfunction, not sabotage. Ushers appeared with umbrellas, guiding guests away from the increasingly wet center aisle. The wedding planner was shouting into her now useless headset, her carefully constructed timeline dissolving before her eyes. "Should we stop it?" Marlene asked, finger hovering over the emergency override. I considered it. The damage was done, ceremony interrupted, perfect photos ruined, schedule completely derailed. But something in me wanted more, needed more. "No," I decided. "Let's see how they handle a crisis." Below, the scene devolved further. The floral arrangements began toppling as guests bumped into pedestals in their rush to escape the rain. Elizabeth's dress, a $15,000 designer gown with a 6-foot train, was developing dark water spots. My parents stood frozen in the front row, my father's face thunderous, my mother's hands pressed to her mouth in horror. The venue director, Marlene's public-facing counterpart, took the stage, using a battery-powered megaphone to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for this unprecedented systems failure. We are experiencing an emergency shutdown due to undisclosed circumstances. Please proceed calmly to the grand ballroom, where we will continue with the reception portion of the evening, while our engineers address the situation." Whispers of refund and lawsuit rippled through the crowd. The bride's father, a notoriously litigious corporate attorney, was already on his phone, gesticulating wildly. "They'll try to sue," I noted calmly. Marlene shook her head. "The contract has an act of God clause, and technically this qualifies as a systems emergency, which is also covered. Your legal team made sure of that." I smiled. Another useless connection. My art school roommate, who'd become an entertainment lawyer and had reviewed all our contracts for free, in exchange for hosting her gallery showings. Below, the elegant wedding dissolved into chaos. Guests huddled under shared umbrellas. The wedding party scrambled to salvage soaked programs and centerpieces. The flowers, the cake, the champagne tower, all were being hastily relocated by stressed staff members. And through it all, not one person looked up to the observation balcony where I stood watching. "What now?" Marlene asked. I checked my phone. 11 missed calls from my mother, 5 from my father, none from Daniel. "Now?" I said, slipping my phone back into my clutch. "I think I'll go get some dinner. There's a lovely restaurant across the street. I hear they make an excellent martini." As I turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of my brother, standing drenched in the center of the atrium, his perfect day washed away, looking utterly lost. For the first time that day, I felt nothing at all. The restaurant across the street from Palmer Estate was a small, elegant bistro with wine-colored walls and low lighting. I chose a table by the window, providing a perfect view of the venue's entrance where panicked guests continued to stream out in their finery, now protected by black umbrellas provided by the staff. "Rough day at the Palmer?" the waitress asked as she set down my martini. "Something like that," I replied, raising my glass in a solitary toast. To family. My phone vibrated against the table for what felt like the 100th time. I glanced at the screen. Mom, 11 missed calls. Dad, 7 missed calls. Daniel, 3 missed calls. A new text from my mother appeared. "Where are you? Everything's ruined. We need you here now." I almost laughed. They needed me? After seating me behind a pillar like an inconvenient houseplant? Another text buzzed through, this one from my father. "What did you do?" That one gave me pause. How could he possibly know? Then I realized he didn't. It was an accusation born of habit. Whenever something went wrong, I was the natural scapegoat, the black sheep, the troublemaker. I switched my phone to silent and tucked it into my purse. The waitress brought my appetizer, seared scallops with a delicate citrus sauce. I savored a bite, enjoying the simple pleasure of an uninterrupted meal. Through the window, I spotted my brother's best man running toward the parking lot, suit jacket held over his head against the rain. Minutes later, my parents emerged, my mother's carefully styled hair now plastered to her head, mascara trailing down her cheeks. My father's arm was around her, his face a mask of barely contained rage as he barked into his phone. I should have felt satisfaction, seeing them brought low like this. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness. This wasn't joy. It wasn't even really revenge. It was an acknowledgement, a statement. I exist. I matter. You can't erase me. My phone buzzed again in my purse. I ignored it, focusing instead on the chaos across the street. A sleek black town car pulled up, and the bride emerged from the venue, surrounded by a protective circle of bridesmaids holding umbrellas. Even from this distance, I could see Elizabeth was sobbing, her elaborate gown soaked and muddied at the hem. Her mother followed, gesticulating wildly at the venue manager, who looked appropriately apologetic but notably unintimidated. I thought of the contract clause Marlene had mentioned. No refunds for acts of God or system malcoms. The 6-figure deposit my brother and future sister-in-law had put down was non-refundable. The thought should have brought satisfaction, but instead, it just emphasized the emptiness of the gesture. Money had never been the point. Recognition had. The bistro's door chimed, and I instinctively ducked my head, but it was just another couple seeking refuge from the wedding disaster. They were seated nearby, their conversation carrying clearly to my table. "Never seen anything like it," the woman was saying. The roof just opened up. In the middle of the vows. "Elizabeth must be devastated," her companion replied. "Her mother's been planning this for a year." "Did you see Daniel's face? Poor guy looked like he'd been hit by a truck. First his sister disappears, then the whole venue collapses." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. First his sister disappears. So they had noticed. "What sister?" the other woman asked. "You know, the artsy one, Olivia? She was there during the seating, then just vanished. His mother was looking everywhere for her when the roof started malfunctioning. Maybe she knew something was wrong with the building and left early." They laughed, and the sound grated against my nerves. If only they knew how right they were. A new text lit up my phone screen. Daniel again. "Liv, please, where are you?" "Mom's freaking out. The venue's a disaster. Everything's ruined." For the first time, I felt a twinge of regret. Not for what I'd done, but for hurting him. Despite everything, he was still my brother. The little boy who defended me against playground bullies, who'd helped me hang my first gallery show, even though he didn't understand by art. Before I could reconsider, another text came through. "The bride's mom is saying you did this somehow. Dad told her she's crazy. No one believes her, but she's screaming about how you stormed out and then everything went to hell." I nearly choked on my wine. Elizabeth's mother was sharper than I'd given her credit for. Connecting my refa jar with the disaster took a certain intuition. My father's text came next. "What did you do? Tell me you didn't have anything to do with this." I stared at the message, at his automatic assumption of my guilt without a shred of evidence. Same old story. The golden boy could do no wrong. The artistic daughter could do no right. I signaled for the check, suddenly, eager to leave. As the waitress processed my card, I glanced once more across the street. The wedding party had dispersed, likely relocating to try and salvage the reception. Only the venue staff remained, hurrying to clean up the waterlogged disaster inside. They would recover. The venue had contingency plans. The reception would proceed in the ballroom, which had been barren the water damage. There would be drinks and dancing and cake. Photographs would be retaken. Vows would be completed. But no one would forget this day. Not the guests. Not the bride. And especially not my family. I left a generous tip and stepped outside, pulling my coat tight against the lingering drizzle. My phone vibrated once more in my purse. Text from Daniel. Please call me. This is important. I turned my phone off completely and hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Home, I said quietly. I've seen enough for one day. 2 days passed in silence. I went to work at the gallery, arranged new exhibitions, and acted as if nothing had happened. My phone remained off. The quiet was therapeutic. No demands, no expectations, no disappointment. Tuesday morning, I was cataloging a new collection when my coworker, Jasmine, rushed over with her tablet. Olivia, have you seen this? She asked, eyes wide. I glanced at the screen. Eventspace Quarterly, a digital publication for the luxury events industry. What am I looking at? I asked, returning to my inventory. It's about your brother's wedding. The Palmer Estate disaster is all over the industry news. My heart skipped. I took the tablet and began reading. Systems shut down at elite venue inside the Palmer Estate wedding fiasco. The article detailed the unprecedented technical failure during the wedding of finance executive Daniel Harlow and socialite Elizabeth Thompson. It quoted expert speculation about possible causes: electrical surges, software glitches, even sabotage. Then I saw it, buried in the 7th paragraph. Sources close to Palmer Estate Management confirm that the system's override was authorized at the executive level. Records indicate the command came directly from the venue's controlling shareholder, who ironically was identified as Olivia Harlow, sister of the groom. My hands went cold. I hadn't expected Marlene to leak this, but apparently someone in management had talked. The article continued, diving into my background as an unlikely real estate investor who had quietly acquired majority control of the historic property during its renovation phase. Is it true? Jasmine asked, watching my face closely. You own Palmer Estate? And you sabotaged your own brother's wedding? I handed back the tablet. I need to take the day off. At home, I finally turned on my phone. It exploded with notifications. Voicemails, texts, emails, even social media messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know if the story was true. I ignored them all, opened my laptop, and navigated to the Palmer Estate investment portal. There it was, clear as day: Olivia Harlow, 51% ownership stake. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel, alone, still in his work suit. He looked exhausted. For a moment, I considered not answering. But this confrontation was inevitable. It's open, I called. He stepped inside, his expression unreadable. We stared at each other in silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. So, it's true, he finally said. You own Palmer Estate. Yes. And you sabotaged my wedding. I initiated an emergency systems protocol. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing my small living room. Do you have any idea what you've done? Elizabeth's barely speaking to me. Her mother wants to sue. Dad had to call in favors just to keep this out of the mainstream press. I'm surprised you even noticed I was gone, I said quietly. He stopped pacing. What? You seated me behind a pillar, Daniel, at my own venue. His face registered confusion, then realization. The seating chart. I didn't? That wasn't. Save it, I interrupted. Elizabeth's mother made it very clear what she thought of me. The artsy sister who wouldn't know anyone anyway. Liv, I had nothing to do with the seating arrangements. Elizabeth's mother handled all that. And you didn't think to check where your only sister was seated. He looked away, guilt flashing across his face. I should have. I was busy with a million details, but that's no excuse. Silence fell between us again. Outside, rain began to patter against the windows, a gentle echo of the wedding day downpour. "How long?" he finally asked. "How long have you owned Palmer Estate?" 3 years. I invested my inheritance from Grandma when the Historical Society was trying to save it from developers. When other investors backed out, I increased my stake. He sank onto my couch looking stunned. "Why didn't you tell any of us?" The question hit harder than I expected. Would any of you have cared? My little art hobbies were never important enough to discuss at family dinners. Mom and Dad were too busy bragging about your latest promotion or investment win. That's not fair, Liv.
Isn't it? When was the last time either of them asked about my work? When was the last time you did?
He had no answer for that. "Do you know how I secured your wedding date?" I continued. "Palmer Estate has a 3-year waiting list, but you got the exact June weekend you wanted with just 6 months' notice. Did you ever wonder how?" Realization dawned on his face. "You pulled strings for us." "I did, because despite everything, you're my brother and I wanted you to have your perfect day." "But then you ruined it," he said, confusion evident in his voice. "I didn't go there planning to ruin anything. I went to support you, to celebrate with you. But when I saw where they'd seated me, I shook my head. It was too perfect a metaphor for my entire relationship with this family. Hidden away, out of sight." Daniel stood, moving to my window. "I looked for you, before the ceremony. Mom said you'd arrived, but no one could find you. I was easy to find. I was exactly where your seating chart put me, behind a pillar in the back row." He turned back to me, his expression pained. "I'm sorry, Liv. I really am." I believed him, but it wasn't enough. Not after years of being overlooked. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "About the article?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to hear it from you first." That surprised me. Maybe he was growing up after all. "What now?" he asked. I crossed to my desk and retrieved a folder. "Here. My resignation from the Palmer Estate Board and transfer of my shares to you and Elizabeth. Consider it a wedding present." His eyes widened. "Liv, no, that's worth millions." "I don't want it anymore," I said simply. "I just wanted you to know." "Know what?" I met his gaze steadily. "That the person you all overlooked owns everything you stand under." News travels fast in small circles. By the end of the week, everyone in our social sphere knew the story. How quiet, overlooked Olivia Harlow had secretly owned the Palmer Estate. How she'd walked out of her brother's wedding after being seated behind a pillar, and how she'd authorized the system's shutdown that ruined the society event of the season. The narrative transformed with each telling. Some painted me as the vindictive sister. Others cast me as the underdog hero who finally stood up for herself. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. My phone became a minefield of notifications. Old classmates reaching out with sudden interest. Former colleagues asking for investment advice. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, sending awkward congratulations for my success. My mother called daily. I let it go to voicemail. "Olivia, darling, we need to talk about this Palmer situation. Your father has some wonderful ideas about how you could leverage this publicity. Call me back." My father's messages were more direct. "Impressive business acumen, Olivia. Always knew you had it in you. Let's discuss your portfolio strategy over dinner at the club." I deleted them all. The most surprising development came from the art world. My gallery owner pulled me aside 2 weeks after the incident. "The Simmons Foundation called," she said, eyes bright with excitement. "They want to discuss your vision for urban historical preservation through art. Apparently, someone on their board read about your work with Palmer Estate." The Simmons Foundation, one of the largest arts endowment organizations in the country. The kind of connection that could launch a career from modest to meteoric overnight. "They've never heard of me," I said, suspicious. "They have now," she replied, handing me their email. "Everyone has." That night, Daniel came by my apartment, unannounced. He looked different. Humbled, perhaps. The golden veneer had dulled. "Elizabeth and I postponed the honeymoon," he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. "Things have been complicated." I let him in, offering coffee instead of conversation. "Her mother still wants to sue you," he continued, accepting the mug. "I told her it would be pointless." "It would," I agreed. I didn't sign the transfer papers, he said after a pause, for your Palmer Estate shares. I raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because they're yours. You earned them. You saw potential where no one else did. Isn't that what you've always done? He stared into his coffee. I realized something, Liv. You've been doing that your whole life, seeing beauty and value that the rest of us miss. We called it impractical. Maybe we were the ones who couldn't see. His words should have healed something in me. Instead, they just underscored the emptiness of too little, too late. The wedding's been rescheduled, he added. Small ceremony. Immediate family only. Elizabeth insisted. I nearly laughed. I doubt I'm on that guest list. Actually, you are. Elizabeth specifically asked for you. That surprised me. Why would she want me there after what I did? Daniel shrugged. She said anyone who builds something like Palmer Estate from nothing deserves respect, and that you gave her a lesson in backbone she sorely needed. I considered this new information. Perhaps I'd misjudged my future sister-in-law. Will you come? He asked. We'd like to start over. I'll think about it, I said, non-committal. The invitations continued to pour in over the following weeks. Charity galas, investment opportunities, arts foundation meetings. Suddenly, I was the mysterious heiress, the savvy investor, the visionary preservationist. People who dismissed me for years now sought my opinion, my presence, my approval. I declined them all. Instead, I took the meeting with the Simmons Foundation. They offered me a position curating a new initiative on architectural preservation through artistic documentation, a perfect blend of my passions. I accepted immediately. The day I signed the contract, my phone rang. Daniel again. Mom's throwing a dinner party to celebrate your new position, he said. She's invited half the Palmer Estate board. Of course she has, I replied, unsurprised by her attempt to associate herself with my success. You're not coming, are you? No, he sighed. I didn't think so. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Liv. Always have been. I thought of responding with something cutting, something to remind him of all the times he'd failed to show that pride. Instead, I simply said, thanks, Daniel. After we hung up, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city. Somewhere across town, my family was gathering, probably discussing me, perhaps even genuinely proud. My brother's marriage was proceeding on rocky ground. My parents were suddenly interested in my artistic investments, and none of it mattered, because I hadn't done any of this for them. Not the investment, not the walkout, not even the revenge. I'd done it for myself, the self they'd never bothered to see. I turned away from the window and opened my laptop, reviewing designs for the Simmons Foundation's first exhibition under my curation, overlooked Finding Beauty in Forgotten Spaces. The irony made me smile. I hadn't screamed for attention or begged for respect. I'd simply walked away and made the call that reminded them all of one essential truth. The person you overlook today might own everything you stand under tomorrow. And I slept very well, indeed.